Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and I'm here today with a couple of friends to talk about all sorts of things, but mainly just to unwind and have a good conversation. So, Dave, you want us to kick us off with an introduction?
Sure. I'm Dave, and this is Olive here. We have a booktube channel called Book Blather. Not your, probably not your typical booktube channel. We're not one of those. I think most booktubers are pretty good about reviewing, reading, and reviewing all the latest releases. We don't really do that. We do some of that, but we have a lot of we'll read stuff like 3 years old, 10 years old, everything, and we do a lot of sci-fi, horror, some fantasy, but we read all sorts of fiction, nonfiction.
And of course, Mr. Mike Shell. Thank you for stopping by. You want to give us an introduction?
Yeah, I'm Mike Shel. I am the author of the Iconoclasts trilogy, which is a kind of mashup fantasy horror, dark fantasy trilogy. And I'm hopefully writing another book.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Still remains to be seen.
I'm always really careful with authors that I really love because I'm trying to be gentle. I don't want to be like, I need it now. I'm always like, when it's ready, it's ready. I'll be patient, but I just want to get my mitts on it. But Mike, I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you, and of course Dave and everyone here in the chat who's here with us tonight, about because something that you did really great in the Iconoclast series is writing characters with trauma and things that they're dealing with and the mental scars that we don't always see that don't isn't really talked about that much, especially in a genre like fantasy. So I wanted to get your kind of what the tools that you use to write the characters, and of course, Dave, to hear about reading those characters and what works and what doesn't work for from both sides. So,
Mhm.
what did without any spoilers, what did you what was kind of your focus? How did that all come to be in the series?
Well, I think when I spoke with you and Epic before, I talked about the fact what I do for my day job.
Hmm.
I've worked, my training is as a clinical psychologist. I've been a psychotherapist for going on 3 decades now, I think. And my specific area of expertise is anxiety and panic. So, in the course of the work that I've done, I've worked with a lot of people who've had experiences of trauma, whether that be soldiers, law enforcement, firefighters, to you know other people who don't necessarily have dangerous professions who nonetheless experience trauma in their lives. So one of the things I was struck by about a lot of the fantasy and horror and science fiction that I read is you don't really see the impact of how traumatic the traumatic things that they're doing. Being attacked by the dead and demons and just kind of brushing it off with a witty quip. And there's a place for that, but I just thought it would be interesting to tell the story and try to create a realistic portrayal of the traumatic effects of that kind of life, those kinds of experiences. So a lot of it has just been kind of been drawn from my professional experience, what trauma looks like in people's lives.
Mm. Something I really loved about the series is that it's a great way to build tension and to kind of draw yourself into the characters too. So that was really a big part of one of the big things I loved about the series is that the tension that's built from those memories and those thoughts and those concerns throughout the whole time. So that's really well done. So how did you write those characters in a way that you portrayed their trauma and their struggles without being too heavy-handed with it?
Actually, I think I was too light-handed with it in the
Mm.
beginning, and I got some feedback at one point from another writer, Tamandra Whitecastle, who pointed out a scene where this would be a great place for him to have a flashback. And it was like, oh, you're totally right. I didn't want to be heavy-handed, and so she actually encouraged me to punch up some of those things, and I think it was excellent advice. Um, Different people experience trauma in different ways, and it's kind of bits and pieces the way that it happens. Sometimes some people have intrusive recollections, some people have flashbacks, some people just have a physiological reaction when they're exposed to something that reminds them somehow of the trauma. Some people actually go into something where they feel like they're re-experiencing the trauma. So looking at the main character of the first book, which is really the the first book is first person perspective, or rather third person, all told from the perspective of what's going on with my main character, and so we see his inner thoughts, and of course I do one of the biggest no-nos of all novels by starting it out with a nightmare, although quickly announcing that it's a nightmare, and so we get to see that's a vehicle for seeing what he's been through and the way it's still kind of gnawing at him. So I don't think that Oric's trauma defines him
Right.
on its own, but I think it's certainly a major factor in his life. And again, it's been my experience in working with survivors of trauma that's the way it is. For some people, of course, who are severely debilitated, it is the center of everything. But there are others who are doing their best to kind of function through it, where it can disrupt their lives, but there's, it's not the only thing about them. So I wanted him to be three-dimensional. I didn't want them to be I didn't want him to be the trauma guy, right? But someone who that's a part of who he is. And he's also a father. He's also someone who is from a poor background and feels some insecurity about that with all the nobles and wealthy folks that he comes into contact with the work that he does. It was important, I think, to show that trauma wasn't the end all of who he was as a character.
Mm-hmm. It's something you don't really think about in fantasy too much. So I'm glad that you tackled that.
So, Mike, can I ask? I haven't had the benefit of reading your books yet. And I'm not just saying this. I have wanted to since the first person that I saw talk about them actually was Leslie over at the Nerdy Narrative a while back, and I've wanted to look at your series ever since I first heard her talking.
Dave, what has kept you from doing that? Is it Olive's fault? I mean,
it's partly her fault because we got to share all the books, and everything goes a lot slower that way. But yeah, I'm a phenomenally slow reader. You would not believe my TBR. It's incredible. So anyway, I will get to it, but so I haven't had the benefit of reading them yet. But when you were writing that though, like how much of would you say, like how like is basically where does on the tier of like important things in the story, how much does the individual's trauma rank in terms of what drives the story or what the story is built around for you?
I think it's significant in that he's having to overcome that trauma in order to do what he needs to be done, do what needs to be done. So I think it's in a lot of ways it's pretty central. Again, not the only thing about him, but he needs to face and overcome his trauma in order to what we find out pretty quickly in the novel is save the life of his daughter and countless others. I loved the review that Phil Tucker wrote of the first book when he really hammered in on that. It's posted on Goodreads where he talks about it's about people getting knocked down and getting back up. Right. And so I think that's a major theme of the book is he's in a way at the beginning he's retreated from his previous life, and it's about standing back up and facing his fears. And again, with what I do for my day job, that's a big part of how we help people to contend with their trauma. When we're talking about treating any sort of an anxiety disorder, there are three pillars. First is reducing the physiological reactivity, which is that that adrenaline rush that people experience. Cognitive restructuring, so looking at their thought processes and how that impacts their experience of anxiety. And then finally, confronting avoidance. It's avoidance of that thing, that trauma, that confronting the thing that seems to provoke the anxiety is the way that you take away its power. So in a way we see, if there's actually, you could see a few therapy sessions happening in the book, especially the second book, The Sin Eater kind of stands in as the therapist in the world. So,
yeah, it's interesting because when I think back, I don't know how many books that I've read actually where a central feature of it is dealing with a particular character's past trauma, and but I don't know why, and maybe it's just my lack of exposure. Maybe I just haven't read enough. But I'm surprised that I haven't actually seen more of that in fiction, because when we're reading nonfiction about, like if we're reading memoirs, let's say, right, like that's what everybody's interested in. Nobody's interested in reading a memoir about somebody that had like a nice, wonderful, happy life. Everybody's picking up the memoirs about those that have gone through and overcome trauma, right?
mm-hmm.
So you'd think there'd be more major fictional characters that are actually dealing with past traumas as part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, maybe there's a lot and I just haven't encountered them. But when I look back at the fantasy books, let's say, that I've read, I don't recall a whole lot of that.
I don't feel like I've seen a lot of that either. I think it was one of the big motivators for me. And of course, they say write what you know. And since this is my job, it's like, oh, I know this.
Right.
But you can see places where they show the effects of trauma. Thinking about the character of the Hound in Game of Thrones, and his response to fire. And of course, that's not his entire character, and we only see that manifest itself now and again. And at the battle of Bywater, or some battle where Tyrion uses the pyrotechnics, the Hound ends up saying "fuck this," and he's out of there it's because he's having a trauma reaction to the fire around him. But I think generally speaking, it's rare, or it's an isolated thing. They'll hit that point once and then it'll be gone.
Yeah. So I guess that's because your books were, your books were based on it was originally like a role-playing module, right?
Actually, it was first. The first book was conceived of as a module, and then when Paizo, who I wrote for the Pathfinder role-playing game, the creative director said, I pitched it as a module a couple Gen Cons in a row, and they turned down. And the second time he said, this sounds like a story that you need to tell. And so that's what kind of got me the idea of maybe it's time for me to try again at writing a novel, since I had tried so much in the past and I hadn't as recently. And so there are a lot of RPG tropes in it because that's where it came from. The kind of the trope of the adventuring guild and crawling in ruins and tombs for hidden treasure and monsters lurking there. So I think there are RPG tropes there, but again, I was really trying to strive for realism rather than the kind of witty comment kind of, again, real fun stuff, and it's great. But I wanted to portray all that in a more realistic fashion.
Yeah. So when it was at the when it was still like in its early module form, this story, I mean, that was pretty much just, I'm guessing that was pretty much just a plot outline, but you hadn't actually like fleshed out any of this sort of character detail at that point.
No. In fact, the module, it's hard to describe without getting into the plot line, but essentially what ends up happening is our main character and his party are having to go back into ruins, a ruined temple or tomb that had been explored before. Okay. And that was the same context for the adventure, was that you were having to go back to this place that had been explored before, where we have a very specific idea of what happened the first time, and maybe that's not accurate. Maybe something else really happened. And so part of the adventure was kind of discovering what had happened the first time that didn't fit the story that everyone had been given. So,
Right. Huh.
Yeah.
yeah, I've always thought that because of those RPG tropes, that anyone who plays Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder would just gobble this up. But I haven't seen a ton of response from the RPG community to this, and maybe a lot of folks who play RPGs don't read fantasy as well. But it seems like it'd be an obvious crossover.
Huh.
They're busy. I guess they're busy playing RPGs.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I because I played a lot of played fair bit of D&D, probably all of it. I played a fair bit of D&D when I was younger, but I was surprised when I have a daughter, well, I have a few daughters, but I have one that just graduated from Emerson in Boston, and so she was in a suite for a few years with a bunch of girls. They have these like 8-girl suites there, and I don't know. I guess it definitely was a chauvinist attitude of me, I guess. But I was surprised to learn that they all played Dungeons and Dragons. Like they got my daughter into it because the rest of the suite they all played D&D, and I was like really surprised to hear that, you know. And I was also surprised to find out how much it had changed. You know, I went to drop her off one day, and I started talking to her roommate, which is like, I think she was the dungeon master, but she was like the ringleader of it. And I started talking to her about it, and do you play the basic, or do you play like you like AD&D, you know, and like like trying to be the cool dad, right? Like,
yeah,
you know what I'm
that was
talking
ancient history, dude.
Ancient history. I had no idea. They were like on to like it's like 5th generation or something.
Yeah,
like totally different.
Yeah. Hey man, I'm hip.
Yeah, right.
Let's roll the bones. Yeah.
That my first attempt to try and fail to be the cool dad, you know.
Yeah.
So. I don't know.
And Mike, do you know of a reason why we don't see more of that in fantasy from your experience and kind of dealing with publishing with your experience? You would imagine we'd see more of it. Is it just escapism? Is that what a lot of fantasy fans are looking for? Is that part of it, or?
I really don't know. I don't pretend to understand the market and what's marketable. I mean, I wrote, you know, I loved D&D as a teenager. I loved the storytelling. I ate that up. And I was also a big fantasy and sci-fi and horror reader, and thought they're great stories here. But you really didn't see anything other than just than I think Dragonlance back in the day. The other was more like kind of traditional. You know, I just realized that I'm not sure I understood your question. Maybe I should ask again rather than just blather on. Ask that again, Steve.
Why we don't see more of that, more of the focus on characters and the trauma that they go through, and it seems like it's a lot more of escapism, or they just brush everything off kind of thing.
Yeah. So you were asking me a totally different question. You were just going to let me say whatever the hell it was I was going to say.
I won't stop you. Yeah.
I just want to. Yeah. Just like
that's how he rolls.
He's not. Yeah.
Yeah.
He might say something interesting. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it comes from Hollywood blockbusters. You're right. I mean, you see, the action adventure movies where Arnold Schwarzenegger's got a wisecrack, after he's killed some guy, some terrible pun or whatever, and I think a lot of it is about this sense of an unwillingness to treat this as a serious form of literature or entertainment. That, we just want to make sure you understand we don't take ourselves too seriously, right? I really think that's what part of that is. If I make a joke and that means I'm in on the joke, they can't make fun of me. Back in the day, talked about playing D&D, some decades in the past, nerd culture was not nearly as it wasn't for the hep cats back in the day. So I wonder if that's a big part of it. Just kind of like, oh yeah, we're doing this stuff, but don't worry, we know this is all goofy and we don't take it that seriously. And frankly, I think there's wonderful storytelling that can happen in fantasy and science fiction. And I think sometimes we respond to that, the humor and the whimsical nature of things, because we need a break from the real world. Hey, we all know this is a joke. You know, I'm reading my I remember I had an 8th grade English teacher who called the stuff that we read slick pulp, which meant, you know, we were reading trash. We weren't reading real literature. So maybe that's part of the, you know, the way that we are afraid to just say, hey, I take this seriously. We can tell a serious story that really touches the heart and can be horrifying and gut wrenching and where we can take it seriously too.
And Drew had a comment. Learn Mike is from Michigan. On his Goodreads bio, Michiganders represent.
Yes, I'm originally from Dearborn, Michigan, hometown of Henry Ford. Anti-Semite, nut job, industrialist.
Chris Mohan says, it's interesting to mention the blockbuster movie as WandaVision was so successful and interesting because of the premise about dealing with trauma.
You know, I never saw WandaVision. Several of the fantasy writers I'm in a group with were talking about it for a time, but I've been pretty burnt out on the superhero thing, so I hadn't checked that out. But I heard great things.
You got to watch it, Mike. One of the great things. Have you seen it, Steve?
I haven't. No, I'm burnt out too.
I think one of the great things that Disney has done with the Disney Plus shows is they've taken these superhero characters, but brought these shows beyond the superhero, just your regular superhero plots and tropes and things. And they've really done so. Both WandaVision and Loki really they were using the characters, but really just went into they were more what I would call science fiction. Really, both of them. They really kind of took them in other ways. They really took them to another level. So they're definitely worth watching. You should definitely watch WandaVision. And WandaVision is one you don't give up after the first episode. Like, it looks weird for like an episode and a half, and I was like, I'm not sure if you gotta stick with it, because it's totally, definitely give it a try. It's good.
I don't mind weird. I'm sure I'll give it a try sometime. I've just had too many people say great things about it. So
yeah,
you sound like me. I get skeptical. Yeah. And of all I'm burnt out on superhero stuff, but WandaVision was the one that looked weird enough to be different. It wasn't just total capes and tights kind of thing. So one of these days. Yeah. You
got a Superman shirt on, Steve, and talking about it, you're being burnt out on.
All the good superhero movies I like aren't around anymore. So
Okay. Get off of my lawn with your superhero movies.
Get off my lawn. Yeah. No, I like some of them. It just and I know people always get upset at this whole, like, it becomes very tribal with the superhero movies, but the Marvel stuff I just kind of got burnt out on. Just kind of saying it's the same setup for the next movie to come in 6 months. So, but
I agree with you. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I agree with you. I mean, I still enjoy them, Steve, but I do agree with you that they've done something different with the Disney Plus shows. It's that's sorry, what were you going to say, Mike?
I was recalling what my middle daughter and her boyfriend telling me that how excited they were about, I don't know which iteration it was, episode 483 in this Marvel universe or DC, I don't know, but they said, I'm not interested. It's like the 20s. Well, if you've watched, the 26 movies that came before it, this is really the payoff. And it's kind of like, I hear it's like someone telling me I need to read Malazan or whatever. Just if you can get through the first 7,000 pages, it just gets awesome. And
right.
Like, I don't want to invest that much time. I have to have seen, 14 movies before I can enjoy this one. I mean, yeah. So
Yeah.
when people are ready to do something, different, when they really can turn something on its head, I'm willing to give it a try. I'm willing to give it a try, but yeah.
Yeah.
But Malazan's such a challenge to say. Forget about reading the books.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Everybody says it differently.
It's funny that series always ends up being a topic in conversation. It always somehow organically just manages to become a topic. So we were just talking about it before we went live about Dave throwing in the towel after midway through the second book.
Yeah, I was like 2/3 of the way through the second one. Yeah.
That's like a whole trilogy for other books.
I wasn't throwing in the towel. I was just I haven't read enough epic fantasy, and that's like a whole nother. That's for fantasy experts. And so I fully believe everything that Philip and AP and all those guys are saying about the quality of it. I have full faith in their opinions about it. I think you need a certain level of experience before you tackle it. So I think I just wasn't ready. I'm going to go back. I'm definitely going to go back to it. It was just too much. Hey, you only made it through 3, right?
Well, we're taking a break.
I'm a really slow reader too, Dave. Yeah. So, I sometimes feel I'm a lazy reader. If I don't get grabbed pretty quickly, I'm ready to just cast it aside. I figure, life is too short. I don't want to read something because I'm supposed to read it. And if it feels like a chore, it's really hard for me to plow through. I used to be able to do that. And I've had some amazing experiences that way. I mean, the book that always comes to my mind when I think about that is The Tin Drum by Gunter Grass. I read that in my early 20s. And it's a fascinating book, but for me, it was really a hard read, and I really had to slug through that and felt like there was some amazing payoff. But it was like, I'm not going to do that anymore. It's kind of like, I've been through college and grad school. I don't want to go back and do any more of that stuff. So I'm a lazy reader in that I want you to grab me, and it doesn't mean that it has to be all action and everything's happening. I want to be drawn in quickly.
Yeah.
I want to be interested in the world. And I know that there are some people who've read my books and so, well, it's kind of slow. They're slow paced, but I think that there's interesting character stuff going on and world building stuff that would draw me in as a reader. But so it doesn't have to be action, but I want to be drawn in pretty early. I don't want to have to be, 3/4 of the way through a book before I decide, yeah, I think I'm enjoying myself now.
Yeah.
Life's too short.
Yeah. Sure. And every once in a while, I could think of a book or two where you do that, you stick with it all, and that payoff never comes. You finish it off, and
wait till you get the 6th book. The 6th book, man. Everything's gonna fall into place. It's gonna, the clouds will part. God will come down from the,
Yeah, it's those books are really dense. Yeah, really dense.
So it was I smiled before when you circling back to the trauma discussion a little bit when you mentioned Dragonlance, because I actually just talking about that book this morning, Dragon's Blood on Twilight. I was just talking about that this morning, the one we filmed this morning. That book was that's like the only book that I've read like more than 2 times in my life, the Dragon's Blood on Twilight. Like I first read that when I was I think 13, and I like hated reading before that, and that was the first one that made me realize that I could really love reading. And I've read it a number of times throughout the years. Doesn't hold up quite so well anymore, but it was one I always enjoyed. But you mentioning it just now like got me thinking, because just a little bit ago I said I really can't think of too much stuff that's like dealt with past trauma. But that one, that Tanis that was actually a big part of his um personality, I guess, was dealing with the trauma in the sense of all the prejudice and being relegated to social outcasts for a lot of his life, that then he was still dealing with now when he was trying to lead this troop of companions. And actually, I hadn't really thought about that before until you just brought that up.
I have to confess, didn't read the Dragonlance books.
Oh, you didn't read it?
No.
Oh, no. Okay.
No, I was more of a Michael Moorcock and Fritz Lieber and Conan and that was kind of what I cut my teeth on in writing. I never, for some reason, I never got around to reading the Dragonlance books.
Oh, I think a lot of fantasy fans kind of got their starter, or at least us old guys. I don't know. With that, did you read that one, Steve? Any of the Dragonlance books?
I didn't. No, I didn't read it.
Oh, yeah. So just to give you the quick summary. It was it was your typical. I mean, it was based on Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss. They used to play D&D, and so some of the characters that they put in that book, it's God. I guess a lot of fantasy books must get this kind of start, but so that was based on some campaigns they had, and they finally put it together in a novel form. But it put together a bunch of different outcasts and misfits and things that came together as this, group of, they're called the Companions, that have this trilogy quest to try to save the world. And but their leader was this guy Tanis, and he was half human, half elf. And because he was half human, he was able to grow a beard and kind of hide his elfish side, which was something that he tried to do a lot, and it was something that he struggled with. And it came up again and again when they were going through the story and they're meeting different races and traveling around, because he always had struggled with that, being because it was very unusual in this world for that to happen. The races usually stayed separate. It was only because of an act of violence that he had been born. And so he always struggled with the prejudice and being an outcast and not being accepted by any community. So he felt he kind of tried to hide that part of his identity. And as I'm talking about it, I'm realizing that this fantasy adventure is probably a little bit deeper than I thought.
Yeah.
Dragonlance is amazing. I'm so happy it's coming back.
Are there more books being written for it, or I don't know that?
Oh, there's a lot of books. So Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss, they did a couple of trilogies, they did a trilogy on the Companions and that main quest, and then there were these twin brothers that in that trilogy that were very popular. So then they did a whole separate trilogy on those brothers, and then they had then some other ones, short stories and things like that, and then they started bringing in a whole bunch of writers because it was so popular. And so there was a huge Dragonlance universe now. I mean, you can go in some bookstores, or at least you used to be able to, and just like you'll see a whole, like, 2 shelves of Star Wars, you would see the same thing for Dragonlance, right? There would be like a ton of these. There's so many. And then Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman actually then came back many years later and did like another trilogy, or maybe 2. I don't know. They ended up doing some more themselves, but yeah, I mean, there's a ton, and some of those are the ones by the other authors are good too. So, yeah.
And I wanted to ask Mike again. I know you're busy writing your fantasy books, but I wondered if you've given any more thought into writing a horror book, because the nightmare sequences in the Iconoclast series is great.
I think that my books are always going to have horror elements in them, but I think I'm someone who's going to primarily write in fantasy universe, because I don't. I want to be somewhere where I don't have to worry as much about the way things work. In the modern world, I'd be more concerned about, having to do more research. With fantasy, I can fudge a lot more, I think, and I think that's where when I'm creating stories, that's where my brain naturally goes more to. I'd like to have more control over the world and how it works, and you can't do that any more than you do in fantasy settings. So I love horror. Again, I always think I'll have horror elements. But what I'm writing right now is I think it's got some pretty strong horror elements to it. So yeah, I don't know if I'd hop to the horror genre necessarily.
That's fair. I don't want to take you away from the book you're writing now. So
190.
190 Dragonlance books. Wow.
Oh,
It's a popular series.
it sure is. That's wow. I didn't realize there was that many.
That's great. Yeah, I didn't know there's. Yeah, I didn't know that either. So, what are both of you reading now?
You want to go first, Mike? Or?
I'd say that probably 80% of my reading is nonfiction. I just finished a book by Ross King called Michelangelo and the Pope's Ceiling, about the painting of the Sistine Chapel. I'm really fascinated with Renaissance Italy, and end up reading a lot about that period in history. So I just finished up with that. I'm actually reading Elie Mystal's book, Allow Me to Retort, A Black Guy's Guide to the Constitution. So that's actually what I'm reading right now.
Nice. What about you, Dave?
Yeah, I'm reading. I got a couple things like open, but I got to stop doing that. But so I just picked up. So that's what I'm saying. I'm always behind everybody. I just picked up. I'm gonna get the title wrong. Nothing but blackened teeth. Is that the right way? Is that the right title?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah, something like that.
Nothing but blackened teeth. Actually, Morning Star I saw was here. He's actually the one that sent it to me, by Cassandra Call. But I'm only like 5. I literally just picked it up at the doctor's office, so I'm only like 5 pages into it. But I'm also not that far into it. I'm in the middle of the Gray Bastards by Jonathan French, but I'm only like 80 pages into that one. I just finished Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. And that was a great book. That was really, really good. Have you guys read any? Either you read any Andy Weir? You saw them? Did you see the movie The Martian?
Did see The Martian. Dug that.
Yeah.
So if you like that movie, that movie got all that acclaim, and it was nothing compared to the book. And I actually listened to the audiobook for that. I don't do a ton of audiobooks, but I listened to the audiobook for The Martian, and that's the best audiobook performance that I've heard. That was really good. And listening to that audiobook, I enjoyed way more than the movie. And I like the movie. But Project Hail Mary is his latest one, and that one is really good too. That's it's about hey.
Hey, good morning. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Good morning. Where's Lana?
I'm not sure. I think she might have overslept or something.
Lana. Well, it's morning for both of us, so I can understand that. Apologies, everyone. My morning got a little busier than I expected, but I'm happy to be here.
So where are you?
I'm in Japan. So it is 7:41 a.m. right now. So
got up early for you, Steve.
Yeah.
Every week.
Every
week.
Every Saturday morning.
Yeah, before work. It's a wonderful way to start my day, though. So I'm happy that Steve has me on.
Of course.
So what did I jump in on? Was there a conversation I interrupted? Or
Nothing interesting.
No.
Okay. Well, it's wonderful to meet you all. I haven't gotten to Aching God yet, but I do know that it's been on my list for years because your book covers are stunning, Mr. Shel. I just have to say.
Thank you. The covers are done by Alexander Rito, who is the in-house book artist for Podium Publishing. He did all of those. Actually had another cover originally that everyone hated, apparently, besides me. And when Podium approached me, they said, "Hey, can we maybe do a different cover for you?" And so he took care of that, and then has taken care of the others since then. I think they're really striking too. I dig them.
Yeah, I'm a fan. That's what pulled me in right away.
Yeah.
I saw it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Have you seen my animated version of those covers?
Really cool.
I don't think so. No, where can I go to see that?
Go to my website, and I think all 3 of the
Okay.
animated covers are on that first page. It's just www.mikeshel.com.
Okay. Done and done. I'm excited to look at them.
Yeah, they're super cool. We started off talking about because in Aiki got in the Iconoclast series, Mike wrote some characters with that he shined some light on trauma and what it's like to go through the things that fantasy characters would go through, fighting the dead and all of the terrible things that it dealt with, that the PTSD and some other mental issues. So we were discussing that, and then we were talking about Dragonlance having a ton of books in this series that I didn't know, and Mike was saying talking about RPG elements in the Iconoclast series, and started out as a campaign. And Dave was talking about how cool he was because he played D&D.
You know, I can claim to be a nerd in most capacities, where I was definitely not cool when I was younger, but I never got into D&D. I don't know what where the line was there, how I didn't jump into that, but I've never really done that before. But the people who do it really seem to enjoy it. It sounds really fun. Honestly.
Yeah, well, it's been many
years. Is it too late for me? Is it too late to start?
It's never too late.
No.
I have a buddy that's been trying to get us to do it again. But it's been many years.
It just seems like a big time investment. That's the thing that worries me about it.
Yeah. It is.
You have to meet up with the same group, right? And build a story with the same group over time. Is that how that works? Did I make that up in my head?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you need a group. You have you have one person that's called a dungeon master, and the other person that runs the game. Like, somebody has to be reading the module and actually tell everybody what's happening, what monsters are showing up, what dungeon you're walking into now. And so they're the dungeon master. They don't actually get to play. It's a different kind of playing for them. And then you need a group of players, right? Everybody's got a character that they're adding to the group that goes on whatever quest that module is about. So, but yeah, it is a big time commitment. I mean, it's usually not. I mean, you can sit there for like a whole Saturday to play a campaign, and you're probably not finishing it that day. It's usually going to be a multi-day thing. So, but I remember it being fun though.
Yeah, that sounds like a weekend. Like a weekend commitment.
Definitely.
And what are you reading, Taylor? We were talking about what we're reading currently.
Yeah. So, well, I wish Lana was here so that we could talk about the India Chords, but I'm doing the India Chords. I don't know if you've heard of that readathon, but so our friend Lana is the creator of it, and Steve is a co-host. So there's 3 different teams, and each team has 2 hosts, and the whole goal is to just read indie. So there are prompts, but it's very free form as long as you're reading indie. I am on Steve's team, Steve and Lana's team, called the Dark Knights, the best team. There's another team called the Narwhals, who are our mortal enemies. So there's a lot of smack talk going on in the Discord. So I am reading for that, trying to get pages for my team. So I finished A Prelude to Ashes by Tiago Adala a couple days ago, which is a prequel novella to his main book, A Touch of Light, which I'm excited to get to now because he's got griffins and it's fantastic in his series. And then currently I'm reading Legends and Lattes, which is, I think everyone knows about that at this point. Yeah. So I'm 50% in, and it is just as delightful as everyone has said. I'm having such a good time with it. Hoping to finish it today, for the team.
Nice.
It's on the TBR, but I haven't got to it yet.
it is as cozy as it is rumored. It's one of those things, if you took the tavern scenes and the like market scenes that we all love in classic fantasy, where they go to a new place and go to a tavern and get the food and look around at the market. If that was a book, that's what this book is. So
from what I've heard, I think it's been picked up by a trad publishing house. It's the kind of thing that wouldn't have gotten picked up by a trad house in 1,000 years until someone does it indie and it catches fire like that, and then the trad houses say, "Oh, let's take a look at that. Hey, we can do that." Because it's certainly not the typical formula that you see for a lot of the traditionally published fantasy.
I imagine not. There's a whole scene of one of our main characters whitewashing a wall. I don't think that's typically what you would find. But I do remember, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. Baldry, is that how you say it maybe? But I remember, poor guy, he released just the art, the cover art on Twitter, and everyone was like, I need this now. And the demand was so much, his next tweet was, I don't know what I'm doing. Give me a minute. Like, hold on. So, yeah, he had interest from the very beginning. But it's really nice to see, someone, not that traditional published is success, because I don't think that's the case, but to see someone be successful, whether it be indie or trad, that quickly, sure. Based on the, the book community jumping on it, that made my heart happy. See that. Hello, tangible.
Mike, do you think we'll see more, or Mike and Dave, do you think we'll see more this cozy fantasy? Is that kind of the next wave that we're going to see that's going to kind of catch fire?
I wouldn't be surprised. Again, I'm the last person to say anything about trends and what's gonna be hot and what isn't. But I think they've found an itch that someone has finally scratched and done it wonderfully. And so more people are going to try to jump on that train before it leaves the station. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Are there other like current cozy fantasies out there?
I haven't read it yet. Quinn Olsen's
the care and keeping of British dragons or something like that.
Yeah, yes,
right?
She's gonna murder me.
Quinn D's book.
Yes.
Well, I think it's A Pocket Guide to the Care and Keeping of British Dragons. I think that's what it's called.
Yes, thank you.
It's very long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's set in Regency, England, which is kind of Quinn's thing, historical fantasy, and everyone I know who's read it has just eaten it up and just loved it. And I think she's the second book is written in edits, and she's I think writing a third. So I've got my fingers crossed that that's going to blast. I think she's almost up to 500 reviews on Amazon already, and it hasn't been out too terribly long. So I think people are gobbling it up.
I heard from within some of the indie writing community that she saw a renaissance of her book after Legends and Lattes, because people wanted more of that. And
yes,
everyone was recommending that book and saying, you want more? This book is more of that.
Yeah.
I did hear that. And there's a more trad published series that I recently read that I think it's been out for a while, but I've seen more buzz about it. Maybe because I've been reading it, I'm not sure. But it's the Memoirs of Lady Trent series. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. It's got cozy vibes. It's very similar to, I think, Quimby's book. So it follows it's like Victorian England kind of vibes, and a woman who becomes a scientist, where dragons are they're dragons, but they're animals in the world. There's something to study, not like big, gigantic beasts. And it's experience is studying them, and it's got cozy vibes too. And I've seen a lot of people reading that recently. So, but I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on why that's happening, because I did have a discussion recently in the India Chords Discord with a couple people about how the state of the world, or state of people's lives, really seems to affect what people are interested in. And grimdark has been the king of fantasy for so long now, and we're seeing this shift. So I'm just curious if I could pass that question off to you guys. Do you have any theories or any ideas? Is it connected to life, or is it just a natural shift, or what do you guys think this is the cause?
I think that makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, for the last 5 to 6 years, it's felt like the world has been on fire. And maybe people are drawn to something that doesn't feel apocalyptic. I can get enough of that from news headlines. I don't need to go to my fantasy books to get that. I can just open the paper, and I think it would make sense that people would be drawn to something like that. And for me, I mean, I've edged away from grimdark because of just the nihilism that you see in a lot of grimdark, and no good deed goes unpunished. And if you try to make things better, you'll only succeed in making them worse. And so my own books, I think the world is pretty grim, but I try to push hope, and that good people can make a difference. I think that though that these cozy fantasies is just, I just need, give me a break. I want to have a respite from the kind of chaos that we're seeing in the world today.
What do you think,
That makes
Dave?
a lot of sense.
Yeah, that would explain a lot. I hadn't really thought about that, but that makes a lot of sense, because God, I guess before 2020, right? Things. I mean, there's always issues, right? We've always got challenges, but I mean, these are big ones. These last couple ones that are, right? I mean, they haven't had anything like this for a long time, right? Worldwide pandemic, effective World War III, and so yeah, I guess probably, right? 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I guess grimdark. People are always looking for an escape in fiction, right? I mean, that's not the only reason people read it, but it's a big reason. And grimdark, that dark fantasy. This is probably the escape 5-10 years ago, right? And now the escape is something very different, because we're living grimdark, right?
TM trademark, live in grimdark. I like that. I feel like that should be trademarked.
Put them on a t-shirt. Yeah.
I like that, but it can only be available, during these couple of years, limited edition.
Yeah.
Let's hope. Let's hope.
Yeah, let's hope.
What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, I think especially with the pandemic. I mean, the last 5 or 6 years, but the pandemic just amplified everything. And I think we've all been holding our breaths for so long that now maybe people just want a chance to exhale a little bit and just forget about things, and just take their mind off of what's going on, and everything happening in the world. They just want something happy and cheerful, and something they can smile, and I don't want to say disposable. I don't want to be dismissive, but something that's cheery and hopeful and bright and easy, like lighthearted. So it makes sense. What do you think, Taylor?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Kind of like Mr. Mike Shel said. I think, yeah, it makes a lot of sense to have it connected to what you're going to in life. And I think you see a microcosm of this with your own reading tastes, right? So you might read a bunch of even, lighthearted books and be like, okay, I want something a bit different here. I want something heavier. So I think you see it individually, often with our reading tastes and what we decide to pick up. Like for me, a big indicator of my reading mood switching is picking up a horror book, because it's not my wheelhouse, but I want something different and darker. So I think we go through this personally. We're just seeing it on a larger scale. So yeah, I would definitely think that has something to do with it. But
Chris says, it's been so cool to see so much discussion and enthusiasm for self-pub books. It feels like every morning has a new hot book to catch up on. Lots of self-pubs out there. Yeah.
Yes.
The audiobook for Legends and Lattes was fantastic. Travis Baldry narrates, and he is just amazing.
Okay. Is that available outside of Audible? Because I'm trying to hold out on, I have Scribd, I have my library, but I'm really trying to hold out on Audible. If anyone can let me know in the comments if they know if I can get it anywhere else. I'm also debating because Tiago's book was also released on Audible. And I'm like, getting that subscription, the free trial only works once. So I have to choose my book carefully if I want to do that. So
lots of juggling with that. Yeah. Chris, for me, the overriding theme of most fantasy is the hope is one of hope, young person overcoming impossible odds, etc. Removing the stakes seems natural for a nihilistic world we live in now. Interesting.
Yeah, I think the nihilism was a good point. Actually, one of the other book I'm reading right now via audio is Speaking Bones by Ken Liu, which is the 4th book in the Dandelion Dynasty. Definitely gonna, unless he completely drops the ball, which I cannot even imagine, it's gonna be one of my top fantasy series of all time, for sure. And something he grapples with is nihilism, but he grapples with it with individual characters. So it's not, the world isn't necessarily nihilistic, but a character will confront that feeling every once in a while in the series, and something he's really grappling with. I think usually when he has those conversations with one of the characters, I think it has more of a hopeful side to it. I hope that he doesn't leave us with the negative side in the end. But he seems to be leaning more towards giving us a carrot of hope. But it's a fantastic book.
That series started with Grace of Kings.
Yes. So
it's in the pile.
All of the books are amazing, but so far, I think you've probably heard a lot of people talk about second book, The Wall of Storms, because Grace of Kings is an amazing book, but it takes a while to adjust, maybe, to the style. Very large scale. Very, very large scale. Lots of characters. And his character work is phenomenal, but it takes a little bit of time to get to sink into the book. So I think once you've completely sunk in book 1, it really takes off.
It's too many books to read. So many books. I got it on an Audible, but I'm not sure if it's exclusive. I wasn't able to find it at my library yet.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you have Libby there in Japan?
I do, but only because I set it up before I moved. So I have my American card set up to my American library, and that has been an absolute lifesaver. But if I didn't know, I would not have access. So if my library card expires, I'm screwed. But, yeah. Do you use Libby, Steve?
I don't as much as I should be. Yeah. I forget about it sometimes, but yeah, I should be using it more.
Does anybody here use...
Available there. Go ahead. Yeah, please.
Sorry.
No.
Does anybody here use Chirp?
I've never heard of
Chirp
that.
app?
What's that?
It's like, have you ever heard of BookBub?
I think
It's
so.
like, so BookBub is like, it's a daily, you can set preferences and you get a daily email of ebooks that are either free or just like $2, 99 cents, something like that. And then there's a lot of crap in there, but there's plenty of good stuff too. And so I was subscribed to that for a while, and then probably because of that, I learned about this Chirp, which is kind of the same thing, but for audiobooks. And I almost wish I didn't have it because it keeps making me buy these audiobooks. I only have so much time to listen to audiobooks. I really only do that in the car. And I keep purchasing these audiobooks because these things will pop up. Like the other day, like Leviathan popped up, and it was like a couple of bucks. one I've been meaning to read for a while. So I keep like putting them in the, anyway, the point is it's not like BookBub. You'll only get like 3 a day. You get the email every day. You'll only get like 3, but it'll be geared towards what you like. And there's a lot of good deals on there. So they're not free, but they're a couple bucks for like bestsellers,
That's good to know. Yeah. Because I use Scribd because I don't necessarily want to keep them, because my style is if I read an audiobook and I like it, I buy the physical book. That's my toxic trait. So, the audiobook just doesn't feel like I own it, which is completely in my head and not true. But so I haven't like gone the route of purchasing a book or purchasing an audiobook outright, which is, it takes a lot of work to purchase, to create an audiobook. So it makes sense that they're, $15 or $8 or whatever the price may be. But I just have that mental hump of getting over, I don't own something like physically. So I haven't.
I do the same thing. And I don't know why, because I'm not like, I would say I'm a collector, right? I'm a book collector, but I will give stuff away. Right. I mean, we send stuff around all the time in the BookTube community. So it's not like I need to hold on to everyone. I'll send it away. But I'm the exact same way. The audiobook is not good enough. I will still need to buy the actual book when I'm done with it. And I don't know why.
I just want to tell you from the author's perspective, I heartily approve of this. And I don't think you should really ask why.
Yeah.
It's okay that you do what you have to do. Sure, the audiobook is great. You want to hear that you have a professional who's doing a dramatic reading, but you really need to feel that book if you like it, right? So you buy that. And if there's a hardback, having the paperback and the hardback, that's important sometimes too. Yeah. So don't question those impulses. Let it go. You deserve it. You deserve
the enabling in this chat. This is what I need.
I think part of it is I think part of it's just and maybe some of it's because I'm such a slow reader, so each book I finish is an accomplishment. But like, I just it's part of that sense of accomplishment. I think when you're done and putting it on the shelf, like just there's another one that you can look at that you finished.
I did a thing,
Yeah. Right, exactly. And you don't get that with ebooks and audiobooks, right? I don't read many ebooks either, and I think that's probably part of the reason.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's my toxic trait, and I meant it. If I get an ebook, I'll buy the physical book if I like it, which is just insane. So but so like, Legends and Lattes, I'm reading it now. I'm pretty sure I'm going to go buy a physical copy of that, because I would like to hold it up on Steve's live streams and be like, look at this book, this thing that I like,
That's dedication, Steve.
Yeah.
No, we have, it depends on the day, but we kind of compete as to who has more of the books that we talk about, because Steve always pulls them out, but sometimes
it's getting out of control. It's getting bad.
Yeah. Well, what about you, Steve? You prefer the physical copies?
I love physical copies of books. And I don't know. Maybe Mike can kind of fill us into what that may be happening in our brains chemically or what. But I love something tangible that I'm holding on to with music too. I don't like to stream music. I like to have the physical copy of the. I like to get to feel the line. Pull the cover out and read the liner notes and have it in your hand. And there's just something about physically having it. Then you put on the shelf and then it's like a trophy case. Like I read that, and,
yeah.
I don't know. It's silly, but yeah, I do like having physical books.
I think mine, it's more about the ebooks, that the ebook isn't good enough for me, that I really want to have that physical book. And I don't know if that I don't think that makes me a Luddite, but I mean, there's just something about holding that book and just loving books.
Yeah, right. It's different. It's just different. And I find myself also, when I get a physical copy, so like Gunmetal Gods, when we had our first chat, I had complete FOMO because everyone else had the physical copy and I didn't. And then when I got it, I sat down and went through the book, and transferred all of my tabs, all my highlights that I had. And that sounds insane, but seeing the physical representation of, oh, this quote, I enjoyed this quote, or, even going back and doing that, it was almost like I read the book for a second time. So I really enjoy that process as well. I just like being able to physically look at my book and remember my thoughts on it. That's another thing I get joy from. Do you guys tab?
I used to.
Oh,
I'm recovering.
Recovering.
Okay.
A little bit. I forget who. My family's like very supportive of the hobby, so they I forget who got it for me, but I think it was my wife got me these little, they're called book darts. You ever see these?
Yeah,
They're specifically for tabbing, so you don't have to like stick anything on there. No post-it notes or anything. So, but I don't do too much of it. I don't know. What about you guys? Well, you're recovering, you said.
I'm trying to, yeah.
What
No,
about you, Mike?
I haven't done that, but if you do, what I really think you need to do is get 2 copies of the book. One remains pristine. It's kind of like that your collector's item you have in the packaging still.
Yeah.
One is pristine, then the other one you can mark up all you want. So
You joke, you jest, but I have these copies of Stormlight, and then I have the leather editions. It's exactly what you just said. Like I will not be
testing.
Okay, so I
Get 2 books.
once you moved your head, Taylor, I saw Children of Time there. So
Yes,
I have to ask what you thought of that.
loved it. Sorry, my
Okay.
phone is going off. I absolutely loved it. So I'm not a huge sci-fi person, but I'm trying to dabble in the same way I'm trying to dabble in horror, Steve. And I think you also, Dave, that's your main wheelhouse, right? Is horror. Am I incorrect? Incorrect.
No. Probably more than most things, yeah.
Okay. So, I'm going to lean on you guys for guides there. But my main wheelhouse is fantasy, but I do dabble in science fiction. And I heard so many good things about that book that I decided that was going to be one of the first ones I picked up, and for good reason. I really enjoyed it. I think there's going to be some science that goes over most people's head, unless you're like an evolutionary scientist. I don't know if that's a title, but you get what I'm trying to say. Unless you study evolution of species, there's going to be some parts that'll go over your head, but it's such an interesting concept. It's impossible not to get sucked in. So I don't know how much you guys know about the concept, but essentially they were supposed to send monkeys down to a planet that they're terraforming that has what's the word I'm looking for? Not an injection, a alteration to their DNA. Mm-hmm.
Virus, yeah.
That
Just speed up evolution.
Yeah, and then it gets into spiders, right? So it's just such a fascinating story. Have you guys read it?
I read it last year, and
what do you think?
I loved it. I think it was my favorite book last year.
Wow.
I absolutely loved it. So I do like sci-fi a bit too, and I did a video like just on those, and I couldn't gush about it enough. But did you read the second one?
I did. I read it just this year. Yep, Children of Ruin. So I think this is usually what people say, but I didn't like it as much as Children of Time, but I still really liked it. I'm also obsessed with octopuses. So like I have this book here, The Soul of an Octopus, and this
I read that too.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. Dude, octopuses are insane. They are so cool. So I think that helped my enjoyment of the second book. But if you're not obsessed with octopuses, it won't be as interesting, I think, as the first one. But
when I read the Soul, I was kind of like in a little octopus phase when I read that Soul of an Octopus. So I read another one too. At the time, it was more philosophical. It was I think Other Minds. It was called.
I haven't heard of that one.
I'll send it to you. I'll go grab it. Well, maybe I'll just jump up for a minute and go grab it. But
Okay.
that was yeah. Let me go grab it. Hold on. Watch out, Olive.
Okay.
Talk
Yeah.
amongst yourselves.
Okay.
And we'll,
What about
while
you
Dave
guys?
is-
Have you ever looked into octopuses? Oh,
I
sorry.
haven't. I haven't.
Oh my gosh, you should.
I there are tentacles in my books. So
That's what I was going to say.
that's the kind of Lovecraftian thing. Whenever I think of octopi, it's from a Lovecraftian angle. So
Yeah. Yeah, I could definitely get that.
Yeah. So this was it. It's well, you can read it. Other Minds, The
Other
Octopus,
Minds.
The Sea, and the
I've
Deep Origins of
seen that.
Consciousness.
Hmm.
Yes. So this was a little more intense. Soul of an Octopus was just like that. It was kind of like a feel good, getting to know the octopus's book. But this one is, like I said, it's a little more philosophical, and it deals a lot with octopuses, but it kind of explores intelligence and like different types of intelligence, what alien intelligence could be like, just because octopuses just evolved so fundamentally differently from primates, So it was really interesting.
Yeah, I'm interested. I recently watched a documentary on Netflix, like My Octopus Teacher.
Yeah.
It's about a guy who goes to visit an octopus every day for like a year and a half in the same area of like the ocean.
Yeah.
I'm telling you guys, they're fascinating.
Yeah.
They're just like they're a mollusk without a shell, so they had to evolve to being highly intelligent. It's just so cool.
Yeah.
But yeah,
you guys
Children of
should
Ruin has
read that.
octopuses in it. That's why.
Yeah, you guys should read those if you're at all interested in sci-fi. Are you guys at all interested in sci-fi, Steve and Mike?
yeah, I actually have both of those books sitting in a pile, and I got the audiobook of Children of Time, and I think I listened to the first chapter, and then got drawn away by something else. So it's eventually it's going to get in my brain one way or another.
I also really like Taylor was talking about the evolutionary aspect. I really like stories that deal with like long-term evolution. And so I think that's part of the reason why I like those so much. But I mean, everything about those was great. But like my favorite book, I think, of all time is a book called Evolution by, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Stephen Baxter. He's written a bunch of science fiction. But he wrote this book called Evolution, which I think is not very well known, but that I would call it science fiction because I don't know what else you would call that book, but it was, it dealt with basically the story of our evolution from the time of the dinosaurs, like the little mammal that was like managing to survive in between the dinosaurs' feet at the time, up until current day and speculates into the future a little bit. And so it tells it through a series of individual characters, if you will, as time goes on. So, it was a really fascinating book. I highly recommend it. But yeah, I just love those kind of stories.
Stephen Baxter.
Stephen Baxter, Evolution.
I am currently on Goodreads because it sounds up my alley.
And he is he's a scientist by trade originally, but he is a very high quality, right? I mean, the mechanics of the writing is, he's really good.
Okay. I see. Go ahead, Steve. Yeah.
I was to say, Brenny's comment, yeah, don't joke, Steve will buy 2 copies and have one pristine and one tab. He also has 2 copies if one is signed because he won't read the signed copy, which I have to admit, I do have 2 copies of the Iconoclast series because I put the signed, the thing in one and the new one, and then I had my reading copy. So
that is right and proper.
Guilty as charged. Yes.
Right and proper.
Oh my gosh, I feel so sorry for all of our partners because we're just here enabling each other. But
I always end up with like an Amazon cart full of stuff after we're done. But it's part of the fun. Hannah, are we talking about Children of Time? I need to read the sequel still.
Yeah, it's still worth your time. Yeah.
So Hannah, I would say be be prepared for two things when you read Children of Ruin. That's a great book too, but like Taylor said, not quite as good as the first one. But I'd be prepared for two things. Be prepared for it to be a little bit scarier, and be prepared for it to be a little more hard on your brain. It got a little complicated with some of the, I don't know, what would you say, Taylor, scientific speculation or.
There were some parts where I was like, I don't have enough brain cells for what I'm reading right now. So there were a couple parts like that. But that is a good point that you bring up. And I do want to put that disclaimer out there, is that the second book does have some body horror that I was not expecting. So if body horror is something that's a big, turn off, you just be aware that I was like, oh, we're doing this now, so it's not what you would expect right away.
Yeah, a little bit of a horror element there. So I got scared at like a couple different spots.
Yeah, me too. I was like, reading about octopuses and evolution, and then suddenly I was not, so.
And good evening, Ken.
Right.
And Hannah, I'm cool with horror, not so much with even more brain power.
I think you can skim over some parts of it and still get the gist of the story, which is exactly what I did. So.
And Hannah, I'm drinking. It's called. I only have beer once a week because I stay away from the carbs. So on Friday nights I have one beer, and this is a Malapi's stout. It's from a local brewer, my favorite brew house. So I treat myself to my one beer a week, on these streams. So, and then I feel bloated and awful all night and tomorrow until I can work it off, and then I feel better, and then I punish myself again the next week. So.
Isn't it crazy what we do for our taste buds?
It is, yeah.
I have the same thing, with food. There's certain foods that do not match with me, but if they're presented to me at the right time, I'm like, it's worth it. It's worth it for later.
It's a special event. Brandy said, I'm adding to our Amazon cart along with Steve. It's never good when he does a stream. At least we both have the same vice, or maybe that's not such a good thing. We enable each other. It's not.
So here's the thing: if you're both reading the, so if you got a signed copy of the book, you need two: the signed version and the not version. And if you're both reading it, then do you need a third one?
That's a good question.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Let me ask it this way, Steve: are there any books in your house where there's 3 copies?
Yes.
Confirmed.
No hesitation. Yes. Yes.
Is there one that comes to mind that has that honor?
I know we have 3 copies of Beguiled by Night by Nicole Eisner, because we have one signed hardcover from Nicole that we bought, and we both have a copy of it because we both read it together. And I think we have copies of, the Ash and Sand trilogy. We have copies of Song of Ice and Fire, I think we have. And I think we have, The Witcher, I think they have multiple copies of. And then I'll think of something else, I'm sure. Oh, I think Leviathan Wakes, I think we have multiple copies of now because I just started reading it. So, yeah, I'm sure I'll think of other ones. But yeah, it's not a good thing. Yeah.
Just the 2 of Iconoclasts?
2, yeah. I have one. Just 2. I have the one that I read that has my tabs in it, and then I have the signed copies I have set away because they need to stay out of sunlight.
Are the signed copies under a glass case?
They are not under glass case.
Okay.
Steve, you're falling down.
What's going on with? Yeah,
he needs to remedy that, right, Mike?
Well, you got the whole 9 yards. You got the Syriac League stamp on it.
Yeah. And I have the bookmarks in the signed copies to keep them flat.
The bookmarks. I still haven't done anything. You're like one of 4 people on the planet who has one of those bookmarks now. So
nice.
Ooh.
Yeah. That's good. That book is probably going to be worth at least $1 more than it was when.
The exclusivity.
Yeah, take it to half price books. I bet you get a couple bucks for that.
Oh no, I don't want. No, I'm keeping that. That's priceless for me. Joshua is drinking single malt whiskey, and you just had Taylor's attention.
Yeah, I'm here. Usually I would be sipping something, along with everyone, but considering I have work, I cannot do that. But yeah, if you don't know, if the other gentlemen on the stream don't know, I run a whiskey and books group that Steve is also a part of for people who like both of those things. And we had a live that was interesting.
Yeah.
In the best way
So-
possible. But,
I'm not a big whiskey fan, but I could probably be convinced.
okay. Well, what is your poison of choice?
I usually drink. I drink beer. That's what I'm drinking now. But I could probably do whiskey if I had to.
Well, I feel like if you're a beer drinker, the best like way to start to get into whiskey is to mix it. Because if you're used to sipping often, whiskey's not going to be a easy transition. Because you should sip that slow in most cases. But if you start doing mixed drinks with it, and then you start to like the taste, then you can that's kind of how I got started in university. Jack and Coke and all that, and then slowly
So
but
physically,
surely,
you're not just talking about alternating. You're talking about physically mixing them.
Yeah. So I'm saying if you're a beer drinker and you're used to sipping frequently, maybe mixing might be a good way. And then if you find something where you're like, I actually kind of like the base taste of this, then you could try it, on the rocks or something. Highly do not recommend, having some of the low shelf whiskeys on the rocks, but it depends. But do you have a good starter whiskey that you would recommend, Steve?
There's a lot. Well, yeah, that's a good question. Maybe something like what is that? It's not Glenlivet. It's I'll think of it here in a second. Let me find it.
I mean, for me, I'm still trying to get into Irish whiskey because the smokiness is rough for me. I'm more of a bourbon girl. So if you're going to go with bourbon, I would say Buffalo Trace. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
But it's not expensive and it's good on the rocks or mixed, or I would highly recommend that one. Very standard bourbon.
What is good and cheap is Old Grandad. That is not
I haven't
expected to
had
be very
that
good.
personally.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good and cheap.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll write that down.
Yeah. Depending on where you are, Buffalo Trace is quite popular. So, might have to do online shopping, possibly, depending on where you are. But some places you can find it anywhere. So,
And yes, brandy does break spines, and that it's like, yeah, I know the humanity. Yeah.
I just saw she just said that you had four copies of a book.
Oh.
The Call Out.
Oh, Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but there's four of us in the house, and everybody has their own copy. So.
Okay.
So I don't know mine.
Dog earring.
Oh,
Y'all are killing me.
is that sacrilegious?
A dog ear my books. Yeah, don't do it. Mr. Morningstar said Steve privately assured me he would be buried with Mike's entire bibliography.
Steve only gave Aching God 4 stars. He's not going to.
No, I didn't. I gave it 5. No, I gave Aching God. Yeah.
One of them, you gave 4 stars to one of them. I figured you wouldn't want to be sullied with a 4-star in your coffin.
No, come on, knock it off. Aching God is one of my favorite. Yeah, it's a great book. I love that book. Whole series. Woodford Reserve is also a good starter whiskey.
That's a good one too. Yeah, that's a bourbon. It's very palatable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a cheap go-to.
Woodford Reserve.
Dude, are you a whiskey drinker, Mike?
Actually, I'm 19 years in recovery, guys. So
Oh,
it's like you guys are talking about your juggling knives hobby.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm so sorry about
Mike.
that.
Oh, no worries.
Sorry.
I'm not triggered or anything. It's fine for you all to talk about that. But yeah, so
That's an accomplishment.
Mhm.
Major props to you, sir. Because these situations that just happen now have to happen all the time. So,
Yeah.
well,
I almost said Japanese.
Yeah.
Major props. Sorry, I mix sometimes. Storm Kelpie.
Chris said, my wife is banned from all my books because she's a relentless spine breaker. Oh, Hannah. Oh,
Oh my gosh, dog earing and breaking spines. Your poor books.
Yeah.
poor books.
I always hesitate to give my wife any books to read because she treats books like they killed her dog.
Oh,
She just
Oh,
brutalizes. It just she's reading in the tub, and oh my god.
oh,
Whenever I see pictures of that, like on social media or in advertisements, I'm like, you're not a book person because
Mhm.
you will never catch me with a book anywhere near my bath. Like,
it's a big no-no.
absolutely
Yeah.
not.
No.
Yeah. I do have a couple books that are in horrendous condition, but that was from the university when I was taking classes with the Victorian classics that I was reading at the time. And when it's for a class, you throw it in your backpack, you write in it, and so those are well loved, and I do treasure those. But I don't want my whole collection to look like that.
Yeah, I did let her borrow my copy of Gunmetal Gods. Yeah. She was so nervous to break the spine that she read it on Kindle instead.
So
Yeah, I mean that book's precious, right?
Yeah.
So I haven't read it yet, but is there anybody that doesn't like that book? I keep hearing about it.
Not in Steve and I's circle.
Yeah.
That's how we met, was our love over that book. So, yeah, I haven't heard anyone say they don't like it, and that sounds about
Have
right.
either of you read the second book?
Yeah.
Should I do the honors, or should you, Steve? Do you want to
Go
pull?
ahead. Go ahead. Yeah. They're in arm's reach for you, so.
These are heavier than I expected. Okay. So we actually have a live on Steve's channel for both of these. So Gunmetal Gods and then Conqueror's Blood. And then we've got a live on my channel for Death Rider, the little novella. So we have read this whole series as a group thus far. But I haven't read his new one, Lightblade.
It's good.
I'm a Spiffbo judge, so I have to be careful with what I read and when. And he entered into Spiffbo, so I haven't read it yet. But I've heard good things. I think Steve read it, right?
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Was Lightblade in your group?
Oh, I don't. Oh, in Spiffbo? No.
Yeah.
No, it was not. So a lot of us, or those of like PL, is also waiting because if it becomes a semi, or a finalist, we're all going to have to read it anyway. So we figure, we don't want to muck up the reviews from the group it's in. So waiting until they do that. So
give me the. I keep hearing about it, but I still don't know really much about it. Give me the quick. I mean, I'm not going to read it until after I've read Mike's, but give me the quick summary. Give me a quick summary.
Do you want to go, Steve, or should I?
No, go ahead.
So essentially, we follow two main characters in the book. One is a religious zealot whose daughter was captured by the people he wants revenge against. And this revenge has motivated him to become a zealot and then make an army based on that. So basically, he has a religious army at his back. And when we enter the story, he is going after the nation that he believes took his daughter. And then the other character that we're following is, so that character is called Micah. And then the other character is Kiva, who is like I always say this when I talk about this book, but I think it's perfect. If you've seen Avengers, like I think it's Endgame, Thor in that book or in that movie, where he's just kind of washed up. He's already done his heroic deeds. That's the vibe of Kiva. So he was a hero. He's already done his heroic deeds and he retired. But then his Shah says, hey, I need you. So he comes out of retirement reluctantly. And then those two characters kind of clash. in interesting, very interesting, unique ways. So, and then there's also a big element, which I think, Mr. Shel, you mentioned a second ago, but with Lovecraftian horror. So there's a huge Lovecraftian horror element in Gunmetal Gods. And it's wonderful.
Okay.
And Hannah said, "Oh, we were talking about books." Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Taylor.
No, I was just saying. I think that's, unless you want to add anything, Steve. That's kind of the pitch that I would give for it.
And I will say, Conqueror's Blood is very different. It's a
Yes.
huge change of pace. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very different. Still, like Chris says, Emil's an amazing author, so the writing skill is still there, but the focus is very different in Conqueror's Blood.
Yeah. It's great. I like it. Yeah. So many good sounding books to read. I got to get faster.
Yeah. Here's another great book. Em said, just just got my copy of Ghost City Girl by Simon Paul Wilson. Picked that up because of Steve. Right on. Thank you for the read. It's a cyberpunk horror mishmash. Very, very good. Yeah. Good. It's a good one.
I think it was Fit to Be Red's video about what is cyberpunk. I don't know if anyone else has watched that, but I've always kind of just had a vibe feeling from cyberpunk. I never actually knew what it was. I just always had like a vibe image in my head. But the definition that he said in his video was that it's not technology per se, but technology-ish settings with characters who are kind of going against the grain. Thus, the punk is what his definition of cyberpunk was. But have you guys dabbled in it? Do you know what is that to you, cyberpunk? Because I've never read much in that genre, so
I haven't read much in the genre, but it's my understanding of it is probably pretty antiquated. But I played cyberpunk once, the role playing, and just once, and my understanding of it was futuristic setting where people basically are basically implant driven setting, where most people are modified with implants. That's what I thought. Now maybe that's what it used to be, at least I think, when back in the day when Neuromancer and the role playing game first came out. But I don't know if maybe the definition has evolved. I'm so old. I always have to keep in mind how things have changed over the years.
Yeah. I just watched his video. So, and then you mentioned the word cyberpunk. So I don't know anything myself. That's why I asked. But yeah. No idea.
I'll have to go watch his video.
Are you a fan of cyberpunk, Mike?
I really haven't read any. So I couldn't say anything intelligent about it.
Yeah, me either.
Which you'd be thinking, so yeah, what's new? But yeah.
I'll cut it out. I'm gonna go City Girl. Yeah, he calls it wasabi punk. Yeah.
So is that supposed to be Japanese based? Is that what
it
that
is?
means?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll definitely be interested in that. I don't know. I have a weird relationship with Japanese-based stories because I live here, because my husband's Japanese and I'm married into a Japanese family. Little minute things bother me as a reader that wouldn't bother other readers, and I'm aware of this. So I'm simultaneously more interested in Japanese-based stories and more wary of picking them up. So I have a very interesting relationship with them. Like I didn't pick up, even though I love oh my God, I really do love this, but I can't think of the name right now. The War Eternal series by Rob J. Hayes. I adore it, but I was wary to pick up his like Spirits of Vengeance, Never Die series because it's very Japanese based. So then it came up in Spiffbo, so here we are, and I did read it. And I was very pleasantly surprised, but I always feel this level of conflict. Like The Sword of Kaigen is an amazing book, but there are a couple translation issues or direct translations of words that would not bother anyone, most people, but I picked them up, and it had an effect on my enjoyment. So, I don't know. I don't really have a solution for this situation that I have, but
I think it's kind of the consequence of expertise, right? When you know
yeah.
more about a subject, for my day job, whenever I've seen anything depicting an issue related to mental health, I've got a different eye for that. And when I see people, one of the most common tropes you'll see when someone is being depicted as having a hallucination, the hallucination involves multiple sensory modalities in the drama. When they dramatize it, that is extraordinarily rare for people who are actually having hallucinations. It tends to be a single modality. They have auditory or visual are the most common. It can be any sense, but it's usually that sense that where the hallucination is. How many times have you seen hallucinations depicted in film and in books where they have both auditory and visual components
Yeah,
that don't tend to mix? So that hurts my enjoyment of something when I hear and I feel it violating my knowledge base about something. So that makes sense that you would struggle with that.
Yeah, I learned something new today. I did not know that. That's now it'll bother me. but
Sorry.
No, that's really cool. I didn't know that, but yeah, I think it's I want to be careful with how I approach this subject, because I don't think it's fair to say you can't write about what you want to write about as an author, right? And you can't know everything. Every person can't know everything. So I don't want to speak like, Emma Wang should not have written a Japanese-based book, because I don't think that's fair or that's right. So I'm careful with how I talk about it, but I'm not sure what the solution is for picking them up. So I just try to be as fair in my review as possible, of course. But I appreciate you saying that it's not an isolated thing,
Yeah.
I don't know if Steve or Dave, if you've run into that issue with the book where you're like, I actually know that more about this particular subject and it's not being portrayed correctly in the book. Have you guys had that?
What about you, Dave?
I don't know. I have to think about that. That's a good question. I
Not
don't
to
know.
put you on the spot, but to put you on the spot, both of you.
You gave me an hour, I bet I'd probably think of one, but
Yeah.
no, I can't. Not off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about much, so no. Not usually. I'm pretty oblivious, probably.
So another thing that drives me crazy, my father was a firefighter. And whenever you see firefighters fighting fires in movies, they're in buildings that no sane firefighter would ever go into. With that fire, they're squirting water from the outside in. It's
right.
It's too dangerous to go in those buildings. So you recognize that for sometimes the reality of it is compromised for dramatic effect. But again, it's hard to turn your brain off for things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I had a recent, not personal experience, but I recently read a book with a book club that I've been a part of for a long time. We read The Stars and the Blackness Between Them, which I don't know if you guys have read, but it's a contemporary book, but it's beautifully written, and it's about two young girls, one who is from I think she's from Trinidad, yes, from Trinidad, and then another young girl from the States, and then I don't think this is not a spoiler. So they meet and they do fall in love, but it's not a love story. It's like, I don't know how to describe it. It's beautifully written, and it's not a romance novel, but they do fall in love. And I really enjoyed the story, but one of the people in the group is from Trinidad. And she was like, yeah, no, the Trinidadian words are word salad. She's like, this is what someone would imagine a Trinidadian grandmother is like. Like, this is not reality. And the author, I believe, part of her family is from Trinidad, but she grew up in the States. And so it started a conversation of the diaspora writing about the culture that they come from without having lived in that culture specifically. So that was a really interesting conversation that we had because, you know, the story does reflect the experience of the author, but it doesn't really reflect the reality of the culture she's talking about. So, and then on top of that, it was a beautifully written book. So the story was great. So it was kind of like, we had a really good debate about that book. How should you rate it? And because of course the person who's from Trinidad was like, this is not zero star, but she's like, this has ruined the book for me. Whereas someone like me, who's completely ignorant of how Trinidadians speak, I was like, oh, this sounds really cool. So it's so relative and subjective.
I was saying earlier that, you know, I think I would stay away from writing straight horror set in modern settings because I'd be more worried about stepping on toes in that way or you know, messing things up. I have an idea for a novel or a novella set in a part of the world that I've created that is kind of proto Arabic. In flavor, maybe pre-Islamic, Middle Eastern feel. But I worry about, you know, writing a culture that has a real analog and getting it wrong. And see, I really hesitate to do that.
Yeah.
I could definitely understand that. I mean, of course, everyone says get a beta reader. I don't think that fixes everything, but of course that helps. Sensitivity or beta reader, but they're also not free. So, you know, it's an interesting balance. It really is.
Definitely. I said I'm not sure why this has happened lately, but it has been really refreshing. But I've been picking up books lately with Asian motifs, just like Jade City, and currently reading The Grace of Kings.
Both of those series are tippy top series for me. So you have good taste, my friend. That's fantastic. Fonda Lee did something interesting where I think instead of basing it on one culture, she kind of blended Asian cultures. She's, you know, Asian herself, but she blended a lot of different cultures in the area, in the region. So it wasn't trying to emulate one specifically, which I think was a good, not necessarily a good choice, but it was a choice that kept it from being, hey, this isn't exactly what my culture is like, by blending it. So, but yeah, one of the things that I loved the most about Jade City was the subtleties that were absolutely correct in that book. But besides the cultural representation, her characters and her politics are chef's kiss. So I already talked about the Dandelion Dynasty, so I'll shut up about that. But, and you have good taste.
Yeah, I can see that why that would be a concern for you, Mike. Just to, you know, because you want to be careful with that. But yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think I'm brave enough to be an author. So I really respect you, Mike, for not just brave enough, but it's an art, it's a craft, you know, it takes a lot of time and effort and work. And I don't know, when I was young, I wrote, you know, my own version of Wattpad stuff, but then it stopped there. So
I didn't finish the first draft of my first book until I believe I was 54, 53, 54.
Mhm.
So it was something that I had always dreamed of doing, but had always just was never able to get beyond 10 to 20 pages of a manuscript. And um, so if you've ever written and it's something that interests you, don't give up and don't worry about the passage of time in terms of when it being too late. It really
Mm.
never is too late.
Speaking of, Dave, do you want to tell us about about your story?
Oh, do we have a segue?
Yes. You know I
Well,
was going to bring it up.
I can't tell you about it. It's a short. Yeah, what he's talking about is I don't know. Well, you guys aren't horror lovers, so there's Regina St. Clair is one of the booktubers in the horror community. That she's also an author, and she does this. She has done these the last couple of years. She's put together these horror anthologies of basically horror tubers. And Steve Donahue, I don't know if you're familiar with him. Probably everybody knows Steve Donahue, right? So he's had some involvement in it as well. And so anyway, she has put these out. The first one was called Local Haunts, and the second one was called Served Cold. And she just did the she's in the midst of doing the third one. And so Mr. Morningstar, who was on here before, I don't know if he still is, he kind of, it slipped out one point. Like Mike, I was kind of always a little pipe dream, but I had a couple just unfinished projects that never got completed. Anyway, I slipped out one time, and Morningstar knew that. And so he texted me and he twisted my arm. He says, Regina's got this call for submissions, and twisted my arm to do it. And he stayed on top of me. I probably wouldn't have gotten it done if he did, but he really stayed on top of me. And so anyway, I got focused and I submitted it. And it's going to be appearing in the anthology this fall. It's called Lurking in the Dark.
Ooh.
But
Congratulations.
yeah, it was. Thanks.
Yeah, that's great news.
But yeah, it was kind of like that little kind of kid. Even though it was a small project, actually like buckling down and getting it done and it coming out now is kind of like a good little kick for me. So I think I'm kind of getting back into it. But I don't know. It's tough. Like you guys, Mike. I don't know how. I mean, it seems like it's tough enough to do it as like a full-time job and to also do it with a day job. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems almost insurmountable at times.
I have my writing process is really kind of strange in that it took me 53 years to get a first draft done of the novel that I eventually published. But really, I wrote that draft in about 10 weeks and just a blast of 132,000 words in 10 weeks, just because it was pouring out. And then the next one, the second book, took me 10 months to get a first draft done, and then the last book took me 18 months to get a first draft. And I just have these long fallow periods. So Idle's Fall, the third book in my trilogy, came out last May, I believe, May 21. And I've a good part of the time since then has just been, I have not been able to write. So I posted a tweet not too long ago announcing that I had managed to write 1,400 words that day, and was kind of miraculous. And there was blood everywhere. I killed 4 or 5 characters in that span. So hopefully things will start kicking into gear for me again. But I feel like I'm a little bit of a delicate flower with that writing process. And if it's just things aren't just right and the muse isn't there, it's torture to try to write. So I kind of wait for the lightning to strike.
Yeah, well, you're also in recovery, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine just as creatives, we've talked about this with a couple people on like page 2ing as well, but it's you're really taking a part of yourself and putting it into the content that you create, whether it's a video for Steve or I, or a book, or so. I don't see it as like a logical thing, like it's time to write now, or it's time to film now. Like yesterday, I have, my weekends are not traditional, so Friday is a weekend for me. So I had complete plans to film because I had a free day, but the muse wasn't there, as you so deftly put it, Mike. And I was like, I don't think words are going to come out right today, if I stand behind a camera. And I don't know, I'm with you. I think I'm also a delicate flower, and that's why I get it. But some days just it's not working.
Did you find, Mike, that? Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, I mean, a lot of my writer friends, I mean, they write every day. People who do this for a living. I don't do this for a living. I make enough money doing this that I get to pay for a vacation or new TV every now and again with the money that I make. I'm definitely a small fish. People who do this for a living have a discipline where they sit down and they write every day. I mean, we mentioned Quenby Olson a little earlier on. She has, I think, 38 children. I'm not sure if I got the count right on that. She doesn't have. She's got a lot of kids. She homeschools. And in addition to homeschooling, she's writing these books. And I mean, she's just churning out the stuff. She's written a bunch of romance too. And I'm just amazed at the kind of discipline that she must have to be able to, wrangle, 42 children and do that. And here I am, I have my day job and I'm lucky, to knock out a novel in a year's time. I don't know how some people do it, but they've got this kind of fortitude and discipline where they are able to crank it out. And I'm of the opinion that it's better to have things written out than in your head. So no matter how crappy that first draft is, it's better to have a crappy first draft than a wonderful idea in your head that you haven't gotten on paper. So, but I just feel like I don't have the constitution to sit down if I don't feel that inspiration. So I think that's one of the reasons why I will never do this, for a living. It's always going to be this thing I love to do and it is really cool, but I have to have a day job to take care of, food and shelter and things like that.
Overrated. Food, shelter. He needs it.
Books.
He needs it.
Did you find that you needed like a little recovery period, like in between each of the books too, like where you just couldn't look at it for a little bit, or?
I don't know. That might have been part of it. But when I wrote Aching God, I actually wrote the first 2 chapters of Sin Eater right on the right afterwards. It's one of the reasons why in the original print run of Aching God, those 2 chapters were included as a teaser to tell people, oh, he's already written. Mike wrote 2 chapters. That's the next book. That's all he wrote. It took him 10 more months to get the rest of it. But there's no predicting, because what happened with Idle's Fall, for instance, it took so long. It was probably 3 months at the tail end of that 18-month period where I did the bulk of the writing. And it was fits and starts before then. And there was even a point at which I was saying to myself, maybe I only have 2 books in me. I don't know if I can do this. So I don't know if it's taking a break. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I consume a lot of nonfiction. I love history, love reading history. So that's what I consume a lot of film and music and whatnot. Art. I love art. And so that might kind of serve a purpose in getting me rejuvenated. But I don't know. I don't know what it is that finally trips it, where all of a sudden, boom, it comes pouring out. But that's what's happened with all 3 of the books, that I hit that point where I started writing, and it just, every time I sat down, I'd 1,500 to 3,500 words, in a sitting would come out. So, you do that in 10 weeks, you got a first draft. So If I was, that's what's so funny. When I finished the first book, I remember thinking to myself, "Oh, this is cool. I can write like 2 or 3 books a year." And of course, that's not the way it's panned out.
We were actually talking to Ryan Cahill on Page Doing earlier this week, and he was talking about how I think he's one of those disciplined people we were talking about, where, you know, even when he had a full-time job, he was like every night until 3 a.m. writing. And he was saying that for him, the motivation is he wants to get a full body of work out there. He wants to complete his series. And for him, you know, we talked about imposter syndrome as well, but he was mentioning, okay, I got the first book out, now I got to make the second book good. Okay, the second book was good, now I got to make the third book good. And he was saying that he doesn't think his brain is going to let him release from that until he's got the full body of work out. So I think it's just interesting to hear writers talk about their different creative processes, because I think he has a very different style than what you mentioned. So, like I said, I think I fall more on your side, Mike. But
yeah, I think a lot of writers now are going the Patreon route, and what that requires is consistent output. Right, you know, and what a lot of them are doing is they're getting a backlog that they can post, but they're having to continue to write consistently if they're going to have the patrons who are consuming their writing as it happens. It's doing something like that would terrify me. I couldn't do it.
Interesting. Yeah, for me, I do. I support a couple authors on Patreon, but I don't really care about all the. I just want to help them out. So I know some people want the constant work. I want to see what you're working on, but to me, it's just. I hope you can continue writing, kind of thing, and you know.
Well, talking about YouTube and Patreon, you know, a lot of people that I know on BookTube are starting Patreons, and I know I get the motivation for it 100% because BookTube is pennies when it comes to, you know, even the big booktubers. So I understand starting one, but one of the reasons why I think I would have a really hard time starting that is because my schedule allows me to get out what I get out right now. So if I were to make extra content, time where, you know, where am I going to find the time to make it worth those people's time is where I come from, because I would want it to be something mutually beneficial, but I could see myself, just the way my brain works, turning it into something hard to keep up with, maybe, because there has to be something exclusive, right? For those people. So you can't just repost something. So I have a lot of respect for people who have a Patreon, but when people will have their TBRs and say, yeah, this is my Patreon book pick, and then I'm doing this buddy read, and then this one, I'm like, how are you doing that? Like, I don't know. I don't know how they're doing it.
A lot of work.
Yeah.
What about you, Dave? Are you going to start a Patreon anytime soon?
No. You know, I'm never gonna make any money from this. So, you know, these rules constantly changing and everything. I mean, I don't have any interest even in monetizing or anything, but I think, and maybe you guys know better than me, I think you have to, like, or else you get YouTube like deprioritizes you, right? If you don't monetize.
I'm not sure.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the same reason, like, I know that now, because I watch a lot of these like ASMR videos, and I'm like, how do they, like, I'm not monetized, but ads still show up on my videos now. I think they're doing that to everybody now. And so I'm like, how do these people like to do the ASMR? You know, you can't have ads showing up in that. So how do they do that without ads? And so I looked into it, and it looks like you can turn that off for individual videos. But same thing, I'm not going to do that because I assume YouTube is going to deprioritize my videos if I do that, right? I mean, I mean, YouTube only cares about the one thing, right? Which is the ads. That's why they have this whole platform. Right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I think I'm supposed to monetize, even. You know?
Huh, interesting. I
So
didn't know that.
when I get there, I don't know. Is it still 1,000 or something that you monetize at? So
Yeah, 1,000 and then 4,000 watch hours, which is more than you would think.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of watch hours.
So no Patreon for me. It would be like Mike said too. It's just too much pressure. I wouldn't be able to keep up with any kind of schedule like that. Like I don't have a schedule now. You know, it's like when I can squeeze it in and get my wife was. I mean, she's like I said, very supportive, but she was getting annoyed with me this morning because she's trying to get the place ready for our guests that were coming tonight, and I'm like. I'm trying to like scuttle Olive into the office so we can do our video, and so like she's getting annoyed because she's trying to do all this stuff, but she has to be quiet, because Dave's doing a video but I had to squeeze it in this morning. I don't know what else I was going to do it. It's tough to.
Yeah.
So I can't even do a schedule. Everybody that's like one more thing about you, Steve, that I don't know how you do it with this like religious. Do you have a religious schedule, Taylor? For you, like. Because I know a lot of people, they're like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Like,
I did.
Like okay.
I did. Past tense. But I had a big Japanese test at the end of the beginning of July. So the end of June was just reading BookTube where. So I was very focused on that. So typically I did Tuesdays and Saturdays. 3 days a week is just not plausible. There's no way. But I did Tuesdays and Saturdays before. But now I'm trying to do the 2 day a week, and I don't want to do them two back to back because I want to give people breathing room, between my videos. So I haven't gotten back to that schedule yet, but that seemed to work for me. And also what's interesting is being in Japan. Even though I'm here, a lot of my audience is from the West. So I have to time my releases for when it's good for other people. Right. So I have to plan basically a day ahead. Be like, okay, people are probably going to be at home, able to watch it at this time in the West. So I should release it at this time here. So that kind of decided my schedule for me.
Right.
Yeah, it depends. If one of my filming days, if God forbid I decide to do something on a day off, there goes my filming day. So it's if I don't have backup videos, I lose my schedule. But I try because YouTube likes it.
Yeah.
The algorithm likes it.
That damn algorithm.
Yeah. But, coming to these wonderful chats and everything has gotten me on a schedule in that regard. So thanks, Steve, for that.
I do my best.
Yeah.
And I know you have to
but
run to
as
work.
usual with these mornings, I got to go now. I got to ride my little bicycle to work. So
oh, cool.
It's super hot and the cicadas are so loud. Can you hear those?
Is that the cicadas?
You can hear them?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. If that's been annoying this whole time, I should have put myself on mute. My apologies.
No, you're fine.
When in the States every 15 years they come out of the ground or whatever the thing is, that's every single summer here. So that's what the window's closed, what you hear. The door's closed. So
wow.
It's insane. But I hope you guys have a great rest of the conversation. And Mike, I plan to get to your books. I do. Very much do. So I'll give you feedback when I do.
I'm waiting.
When I get my 3 copies.
If I promised for an honest review, I could make that happen.
Okay. All right. We'll chat. Yeah. But thanks for having me, Steve, as always. It was nice to meet you, Dave.
Thanks for coming by.
Thanks. Yeah, you too, Taylor.
Yeah, talk to you guys soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
So cool.
I'm going to have to take off now, too, guys.
Okay.
So,
yeah, we can go ahead and...
Thanks so much for having me on. It was a blast.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for coming by.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, Dave?
All right. I guess we're calling it out.
We really know how to clear our room out, huh? Well, thanks for coming by. Let me know when you want to come back and, come back and chat.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, cool. Thanks everybody for coming by and interacting with us and hanging out on this Friday night. Thanks for just spending the night with us and talking about a slew of topics. So, thanks everybody.
Bye, everyone.